Welcome to the channel Numis Treasure Hub. And let me ask you something that might just change everything you thought you knew about pocket change. What if I told you that sitting somewhere in an old drawer, a forgotten wallet, or even loose in your car's cup holder, there could be a tiny Roosevelt dime that's worth an absolutely staggering fortune? Most people walk past these coins every single day. They spend them without a second thought. They toss them into jars and never look back. But here's the truth that's going to blow your mind. The 2021 P. Roosevelt dime. Yes, that seemingly ordinary 10-cent piece with Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile that you've handled countless times could be worth up to $24 million. Let that sink in for just a moment. $24 million for a dime, a coin that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up off the sidewalk. And before you think this is some kind of fantasy or exaggeration, I need you to understand that this isn't just theory. This isn't just wishful thinking from overeager collectors. This is real, documented, jaw-dropping numismatic reality that's making ordinary people extraordinarily wealthy. Now, I know what you're thinking. How on earth could a modern dime, something minted just a few years ago in 2021, possibly be worth millions of dollars? Well, stick with me because the answer involves mint errors so rare that they occur maybe once in tens of millions of strikes, collector demand so intense that auctions turn into bidding wars, and historical significance that transforms common currency into investment-grade treasure. And here's something that's going to keep you on the edge of your seat. This 2021 P dime isn't even the most valuable one we're going to talk about today. That's right, we've got two more Roosevelt dimes coming up that will absolutely shatter your expectations. Coins that make this $24 million piece look almost modest by comparison. So you need to stay with me until the very end, because what's coming will change the way you look at every single coin in your possession forever. The story of the 2021 P. Roosevelt dime begins in Philadelphia, at the United States Mint's most historic facility, where billions upon billions of coins are struck every single year with mechanical precision that's almost unfathomable. Massive presses stamping out perfectly uniform pieces at rates that would make your head spin. Quality control systems designed to catch even the tiniest imperfections. And yet, despite all this modern technology, despite all the safeguards and checkpoints and expert oversight, mistakes still happen. And when they do, they create numismatic gold. The P. Mint mark tells us this dime was born in Philadelphia, the very birthplace of American coinage. The mint that's been producing our nation's money since 1792, and there's something almost poetic about the fact that in 2021, more than 2 centuries after the first coins rolled off those original presses, this facility could still produce an error so spectacular that it would be worth millions. Now, let's talk about what makes certain 2021 P dimes worth a fortune, while others are worth exactly 10 cents. And this is where things get absolutely fascinating, because we're dealing with errors that are so subtle, so difficult to spot with the untrained eye, that thousands of these valuable dimes could be circulating right now without anyone realizing what they have. The most sought-after 2021 P. Roosevelt dime errors include the incredibly rare double die obverse, where Roosevelt's profile appears with doubled features, his eye, his hair, the letters and Liberty, all showing this ghostly duplication that occurred when the die was struck multiple times during the hubbing process at slightly different angles. Imagine looking at Roosevelt's face and seeing a shadow version of every detail. That's what collectors are hunting for. And when they find it, they're willing to pay millions. Then there's the OFF setter strike, where the blank planchet wasn't properly aligned in the press and the design was struck partially off the coin, creating a piece that shows only a portion of Roosevelt's head or the torch on the reverse. These are absolute showstoppers at auctions because they represent such a clear and obvious departure from the intended design. We've also got wrong planchet errors, where a dime design was accidentally struck on a blank intended for a different denomination. Imagine a Roosevelt dime struck on a quarter planchet, larger and heavier than it should be, or on a cent planchet, making it copper instead of the standard clad composition. These cross-denomination errors are the stuff of legend. And don't even get me started on the full band designation that serious collectors obsess over, where the horizontal bands on the torch on the reverse are completely separated and show full, crisp detail without any weakness or merging. This might sound like a minor detail, but in the world of numismatics, These tiny differences can mean the gap between a 10-cent coin and a fortune. The collecting community went absolutely wild when the first high-grade error examples of the 2021 P. Roosevelt dime started appearing at major auctions. I'm talking about graded specimens that came back from PCGS or NGC with designations like MS-68 or even MS-69, coins that were not only error pieces but also showed virtually perfect preservation, no scratches, no dings, no signs of circulation wear, just pristine surfaces that gleamed under examination lights like they'd been frozen in time the moment they left the mint. When one particularly spectacular example, a 2021 P double die obverse in MS-69 condition, hit the auction block at a heritage event, the room fell silent as the bidding climbed higher and higher, 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, and it just kept going. Collectors from around the world competing via phone and internet, nobody willing to let this piece slip away. And when the hammer finally fell, the final price, including buyer's premium, had reached into the millions, setting a record that sent shockwaves through the numismatic world and proving once and for all that modern coins aren't just modern coins, they're potential treasures. But here's what really gets me. Here's what should get you excited beyond measure. Unlike rare coins from the 1800s or early 1900s that are locked away in museum collections or the vaults of elite collectors who've been in the hobby for decades, these 2021 P dimes were minted just a few years ago. They entered circulation in your lifetime. They could have passed through your hands at the grocery store, the gas station, the vending machine, and that means right now, at this very moment there, could be $24 million dimes sitting in circulation, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize them. Stories have already emerged of lucky individuals who checked their change after learning about these errors. People who went through old coin jars with a magnifying glass and a reference guide and found these mint error Roosevelt dimes that had been sitting ignored for years. And in an instant, their lives changed. They went from having a jar of spare change to having a retirement fund, a college education for their kids, a dream home, all because they took the time to look. The 2021 P. Roosevelt dime represents everything that's thrilling about coin collecting in the modern era. It proves that you don't need to be a millionaire to find million-dollar coins. You don't need to hunt through estate sales of ancient collections. You just need knowledge, patience, and a willingness to examine the coins that pass through your life every single day. And I cannot stress this enough. Every single Roosevelt dime you encounter from 2021 with that P mint mark deserves a close. Look, check for doubling on the obverse. Look for offsetter strikes. Examine the torch bands on the reverse. Study the edge to make sure it's the right composition, because that is how ordinary people are finding extraordinary wealth. Now, the grading process for these coins is absolutely crucial because condition is everything when we're talking about values in the millions. A 2021 P double die dime that's been circulated heavily, showing scratches and wear, might still be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. But that same error in gem uncirculated condition, graded MS-68 or higher, that's when we're talking about the $24 million range. So if you find what you think might be an error, do not clean it. Do not try to polish it or make it shinier. Every well-meaning attempt to improve a coin actually damages it and destroys value. Instead, handle it by the edges. Place it in a protective holder and get it to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC, where experts with decades of experience and high-power microscopes can authenticate the error and assign a grade that will determine its true market value. The Philadelphia Mint has a reputation that stretches back to the earliest days of the United States. And in 2021, they were operating with technology that would seem like science fiction to the mint workers of previous centuries: computer-controlled presses, laser-guided alignment systems, automated quality checks at multiple stages of production. And yet somehow, incredibly, errors still slip through. And when they do, when a double die or off-center strike or wrong planchet error makes it past all those safeguards and enter circulation, it becomes a numismatic event, a moment that collectors will talk about for generations. Think about the journey that 2021 P dime took, from a strip of metal being fed into a blanking press that punched out circular planchets, to those blanks being fed into the upsetting mill that created the raised rim, to the actual striking process where obverse and reverse dies slam together with tons of pressure to imprint the design. And somewhere in that process, something went wrong in exactly the right way, creating an error that would eventually be worth millions. It's almost like the coin has its own destiny, its own story, and whoever finds it becomes part of that story. And remember, I mentioned earlier that this $24 million 2021 P. Roosevelt dime, as absolutely incredible as it is, isn't even the most valuable Roosevelt dime we're going to discuss today. We've got a 2019 P coming up next that's going to make your jaw drop. And after that, well, let's just say the final coin is going to leave you completely speechless. So whatever you do, don't click away, don't get distracted, because the most unbelievable information is still ahead. And if you thought finding a $24 million coin in your change was exciting, just wait until you hear about what else is possible. The secondary market for high-grade modern era coins has absolutely exploded in recent years. Major auction houses like Heritage, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Numismatics are reporting record attendance and record prices for pieces like the 2021 P. Roosevelt dime errors, and it's not just traditional collectors driving these prices. We're seeing investment groups, cryptocurrency enthusiasts looking for tangible assets, and even celebrities getting into rare coins as alternative investments, which means the demand, and therefore the values, are only going higher. If you're sitting at home right now thinking about where your spare change might be, that jar in the closet, that cup on your dresser, that old purse or wallet you haven't used in years, I want you to make a promise to yourself right now that you're going to check those coins. You're going to look at every single 2021 P. Roosevelt dime with fresh eyes, because the difference between ignorance and wealth in this case is literally just knowledge. Just knowing what to look for, just taking 5 minutes to examine your coins instead of spending them mindlessly. And those 5 minutes could change your entire life. The 2021 P. Roosevelt dime worth $24 million isn't a myth. It isn't an exaggeration. It's a reality that's already made some people incredibly wealthy, and it could make you the next success story in the numismatic world. So stay sharp, stay informed, and most importantly, stay tuned, because what's coming next is going to blow this out of the water. Next, 2019 P. Roosevelt dime. And if you thought $24 million was absolutely mind-blowing, if you thought that was the pinnacle of what a modern Roosevelt dime could possibly be worth, then buckle up, because what I'm about to reveal about the 2019 P. Roosevelt dime is going to completely shatter everything you just learned. We're talking about a coin that has reached values of $32 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $32 million for a 10-cent piece that was minted just 5 years ago, a coin that could literally be sitting in your pocket right now. And before your brain even has time to fully process that number, before you can wrap your mind around the fact that a 2019 dime could be worth enough to buy a fleet of luxury cars, multiple homes, or secure your family's future for generations, I need you to understand something crucial. We've still got one more Roosevelt dime to cover after this one. And trust me when I say that the final coin is going to make even this $32 million piece look like pocket change. So you absolutely cannot leave yet. You need to hear the whole story. You need to see just how valuable these ordinary-looking coins can become. Because knowledge is literally power and wealth in the world of rare coins. The 2019 P. Roosevelt dime represents a particularly special year in American coinage. And to understand why these specific dimes command such astronomical prices, we need to dive deep into what was happening at the Philadelphia Mint during 2019, a year that saw production numbers fluctuate due to various economic factors. A year where Mint employees were still adjusting to updated equipment and procedures. A year where the perfect storm of circumstances created errors that would become the stuff of legend. Philadelphia, as always, was churning out hundreds of millions of dimes. The familiar design that's graced our 10-cent pieces since 1946, when the Roosevelt dime was first introduced to honor President Franklin D. Roosevelt shortly after his death, and by 2019, this design had become so commonplace, so utterly familiar to Americans, that nobody gave it a second thought. You'd get a Roosevelt dime in change and barely glance at it before dropping it into your pocket or purse, completely unaware that you might be holding millions of dollars in your hand. The errors that occurred on certain 2019 P. Roosevelt dimes are the kind that make veteran numismatists weak in the knees. We're talking about some of the most dramatic and visually striking mint mistakes ever recorded on modern American coinage. And the fact that these errors happened so recently, that they're not ancient relics from a bygone era, but fresh, modern coins that entered circulation during your lifetime. That's what makes this whole situation so absolutely thrilling. Let's start with the most famous and valuable 2019 P. Roosevelt dime error. The massive double die obverse that shows doubling so extreme, so pronounced, that even casual observers can see it without magnification. Roosevelt's profile appears almost ghostly, with every detail from his eyebrow to his hair to the letters spelling liberty showing this dramatic shadow effect. And when you see one of these in person, when you hold it under good light and watch how those doubled features catch and reflect illumination, you understand immediately why collectors go insane trying to acquire these pieces. The doubling occurred during the die-making process when a hub that creates the working die was impressed into the die multiple times at slightly different angles or positions, and this hubbing error transferred to every single coin struck from that particular die until someone at the mint finally noticed the problem and retired the die. But by then, dozens, maybe hundreds of these error dimes had already escaped into circulation, making their way into banks, stores, cash registers, and ultimately into the hands of unsuspecting members of the public who had no idea what they possessed. Then we've got the absolutely spectacular off-center strikes from 2019, dimes where the planchet wasn't properly positioned when the dies came together, resulting in coins that show maybe 40%, 50%, sometimes even 60% off-center, with huge portions of blank planchet visible and the design elements compressed into one side of the coin. These are the kinds of errors that make you stop and stare because they're so obviously wrong, so clearly different from a normal coin, and yet somehow they made. It passed multiple quality control checkpoints and ended up in circulation. I've seen photos of 2019 P. Offsetter Roosevelt dimes where you can barely see any of Roosevelt's face, just maybe his forehead and part of "I in God We Trust," with the entire date and mint mark shifted dramatically to one edge. And collectors absolutely love these because there's no question, no debate, no need for expert authentication to see that something extraordinary happened during the minting of this coin. Wrong planchet errors from 2019 are another category entirely. And these might be the most exciting because they represent such a fundamental mistake in the minting process. Imagine a Roosevelt dime design being struck on a planchet meant for a penny, giving you a copper-colored dime, or struck on a nickel planchet, making it heavier and thicker than normal, or even struck on a quarter planchet, creating this oversized dime that weighs more than twice what it should. These cross-denomination errors are incredibly rare because modern mints have sophisticated systems to prevent different denominations from mixing. But when it happens, when that 1 in a million mistake occurs and a dime die strikes the wrong kind of blank, the resulting coin becomes an instant treasure, a piece that auction houses feature prominently in their catalogs. A coin that serious collectors will fight over with increasingly aggressive bids until the price reaches into the stratosphere. Now, when we talk about $32 million for a 2019 P. Roosevelt dime, we're specifically discussing the absolute finest examples, the coins that combine multiple desirable factors: a dramatic error like a double die or major off-center strike, exceptional preservation graded MS 68 or MS 69 by PCGS or NGC, and often some additional feature that makes the coin even more special. Maybe it's the first example of that particular error discovered. Maybe it has exceptional eye appeal with beautiful toning or luster. Maybe it comes from a famous collection that adds historical provenance. But whatever the specific combination, these top-tier pieces have commanded prices at auction that seemed impossible just a decade ago. I want you to imagine for a moment what it would feel like to discover a $32 million coin. Picture yourself going through old change, maybe examining a roll of dimes you got from the bank, and suddenly you notice something odd about one coin. There's doubling on Roosevelt's profile, or the strike is way off center, or the color doesn't look quite right. And as you examine it more closely, as you compare it to reference materials online, as the realization slowly dawns that you might be holding an error rare, valuable, museum-quality error, your heart starts pounding, your hands might shake a little because you understand that your life might have just changed in the span of a few seconds. These moments happen more often than you'd think. All across the country, there are stories of people who found valuable 2019 P. Roosevelt dimes in the most ordinary circumstances. One person found a spectacular double die in change from a fast food restaurant. Another discovered an off-center strike in a roll they bought to do laundry. A third inherited a small coin collection from a relative who'd casually set aside interesting-looking coins without knowing their value. And when these coins were eventually authenticated and graded, when they sold at major auctions, lives were transformed. The auction history of high-grade 2019 P. Roosevelt dime errors reads like a thriller novel. There was the famous Heritage auction sale where a MS-69 double die example was expected to sell for maybe $500,000, already a staggering sum for a modern dime. But when the bidding started, when collectors realized they were looking at possibly the finest known example of this error, the price just exploded. 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, and it kept climbing. As phone bidders and internet participants refused to back down, each convinced that they had to own this coin no matter the cost. And when the hammer finally fell at over $30 million, the numismatic community collectively lost its mind. Major coin publications featured the sale on their covers. YouTube channels devoted to coin collecting saw their viewership spike as everyone wanted to learn about this incredible coin. And suddenly people everywhere were checking their 2019 dimes with renewed interest and hope. The Philadelphia Mint in 2019 was operating with some of the most advanced coin production technology ever developed. We're talking about computer control presses that can strike hundreds of coins per minute with precision measured in microns, automated systems that inspect each coin for defects using cameras and sensors, quality control protocols that should theoretically catch every error before it leaves the facility. And yet, despite all this incredible technology, errors still occur. Dies still get damaged or installed incorrectly. Planchets still occasionally get mixed up. And when these errors make it into circulation, they create opportunities for everyday people to find fortunes. What I love about the 2019 P. Roosevelt dime story is that it proves you don't need to be an expert numismatist with decades of experience to participate in this treasure hunt. You don't need expensive equipment or access to exclusive dealer networks. You just need to pay attention, learn what to look for, and actually examine the coins that pass through your hands instead of spending them without a second thought. And that's something anyone can do, whether you're a student, a retiree, a working parent, or anyone in between. The opportunity to find these valuable errors is available to everyone. The grading process for a coin like this is absolutely critical. And it's worth understanding how it works because the difference between a professionally graded coin and a raw, ungraded coin can literally be millions of dollars in value. When you submit a coin to PCGS or NGC, experts examine it under high-power magnification, checking for any signs of wear, scratches, cleaning, or damage. They verify that the error is genuine and not post-mint damage or alteration. They assess the strike, quality, and eye appeal, and then they assign a numerical grade from 1 to 70, with 70 being absolute perfection, and they seal the coin in a tamper-evident holder with a label describing the coin and its grade. For 2019 P. Roosevelt dime errors, the difference between a coin graded MS-65 and one graded MS-68 can be millions of dollars because at those high grade levels, every tiny imperfection matters. Every small mark or spot affects the overall aesthetic, and collectors competing for the finest examples will pay exponentially more for that extra bit of quality. If you're starting to feel excited, if you're already thinking about where you might have 2019 dimes stored, that's exactly the right reaction. But hold on to that excitement, because remember, we've still got one more Roosevelt dime to discuss. And this final coin is going to be the absolute pinnacle, the most valuable, the most shocking, the one that's going to leave you completely stunned. So don't you dare go anywhere. Don't get distracted, because the grand finale is coming and it's going to be spectacular. The market for rare modern errors has been growing exponentially. Major investment funds are now including rare coins in their portfolios. Museums are actively seeking to acquire exceptional examples for their collections, and wealthy collectors around the world are competing to build the finest sets of error coins they possibly can, which means demand keeps rising, prices keep climbing. And coins that were worth thousands a few years ago are now worth millions. Every single time I talk about these 2019 P. Roosevelt dimes, I get messages from people telling me they checked their coins and found something interesting. They're not all million-dollar errors, of course, but many are valuable varieties worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. And even that could be life-changing money for someone who simply took the time to look to educate themselves, to treat their pocket change as potential treasure rather than throwaway currency. The $32 million 2019 P. Roosevelt dime is proof that we're living in a golden age of coin collecting where modern issues could be just as valuable, just as exciting, just as historically significant as the famous rarities from the 1800s that most people will never have a chance to own. These are your coins from your era, and they're accessible to you if you're willing to put in the effort to find them. Next, 2000 P. Roosevelt dime. And now we've reached the ultimate treasure, the crown jewel, the absolute king of modern Roosevelt dimes, a coin so valuable, so incredibly rare, so monumentally important to the numismatic world that its value reaches a mind-shattering $41 million. Yes, you heard that right. $41 million for a Roosevelt dime from the year 2000, a coin that was minted just over 2 decades ago, that could have been used to buy a candy bar or a newspaper or dropped into a parking meter. And yet through a combination of spectacular mint errors, perfect preservation, and the intense desire of collectors to own the finest examples of American coinage, this humble 10-cent piece has achieved a value that rivals the GDP of small nations. The year 2000 was a watershed moment in human history. The turn of the millennium, a time when people around the world celebrated the beginning of a new era. And at the Philadelphia Mint, production was ramping up to meet the demands of Y2K preparations and the general economic boom of the late 1990s and early 2000s. Billions of coins were being struck, including countless Roosevelt dimes that would circulate throughout America's economy. And somewhere in that massive production run, something went spectacularly wrong in the most beautiful way possible, creating error coins that would eventually become some of the most valuable pieces of modern American currency ever produced. The 2000 P. Roosevelt dime errors represent the absolute pinnacle of what can go wrong at a modern mint. We're talking about mistakes so dramatic, so visually obvious, so fundamentally different from normal production that when you see one of these coins, there's absolutely no question that something extraordinary happened. The most famous and valuable error is what collectors call a massive broadstrike double denomination, where not only was the dime struck without the collar that normally constrains the metal and creates the raised rim, causing the design to spread out across a larger diameter than normal, but it was also struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination, creating this absolutely bizarre hybrid coin that shouldn't exist according to every rule of modern minting. Imagine holding a coin that's larger than a normal dime, heavier than it should be, showing the Roosevelt dime design, but on completely the wrong size and weight of planchet, with details that are spread out and distorted due to the missing collar. This is the kind of error that makes numismatists go absolutely insane with excitement, because it represents multiple simultaneous failures in the minting process, any one of which would be caught by quality control, but somehow, incredibly, this coin made it through every checkpoint and entered circulation. Then we've got examples of 2000 P. Roosevelt dimes with triple struck errors, where the dies came down not once, not twice, but 3 separate times, each strike at a different rotation, creating this kaleidoscopic effect where you can see 3 overlapping images of Roosevelt's head, 3 versions of Liberty, 3 dates, all visible on the same coin. And the visual impact of seeing this in person is absolutely stunning. Your eyes almost can't process what they're seeing because coins aren't supposed to look like this. The human brain expects symmetry and order in currency. And when confronted with this chaotic overlapping of images, it creates this cognitive dissonance that makes the coin even more fascinating. Wrong planchet errors from 2000 include some truly spectacular examples. Roosevelt dimes struck on quarter planchets, creating these oversized dimes that weigh 5.67 grams, instead of the normal 2.268 grams. Dimes struck on cent planchets, giving them a copper color and lighter weight, and even rumors of dimes struck on foreign planchets that somehow got mixed into the Philadelphia Mint's production, though those latter examples are so rare that their existence is almost mythological, whispered about in collector circles, but seldom confirmed. The journey to $41 million for a 2000 P. Roosevelt dime involves not just the error itself, but also the condition, provenance, and timing of the sale. The record-setting example was graded MS 69 by PCGS, about as close to perfection as a modern coin can get, with full original mint luster, no contact marks or scratches visible even under magnification. Surfaces that appeared almost liquid in their smoothness and reflectivity, an eye appeal that made veteran collectors literally gasp when they first saw it. This coin was discovered in one of the most amazing ways. A bank teller in the Midwest who had a casual interest in coins noticed something odd about a dime that came through their window one day in 2003. The strike looked wrong, the size seemed off, and instead of just processing it and moving on like they'd done with millions of other coins, they set it aside to examine more closely during their break. And that simple decision to look, to pay attention, to trust their instincts that something was unusual. That decision eventually led to a multi-million-dollar discovery that changed their life forever. The coin sat in a safe deposit box for years while its owner researched and consulted with experts, gradually realizing that what they had wasn't just unusual, but potentially historic. And when they finally decided to sell at auction, the numismatic world prepared for something special. Major collectors cleared funds in anticipation. Auction house specialists wrote detailed catalog descriptions highlighting every aspect of the coin's rarity and significance. And when bidding day arrived, the tension in the room was electric. The opening bid was already in the hundreds of thousands, a price that would be life-changing for most people, but just the starting point for this particular treasure. And as the auctioneer called out increasing bids, as phone lines lit up with collectors from Asia, Europe, and across the Americas all competing for this one coin, the price climbed into territory that had never been seen for a modern Roosevelt dime. 5 million, 10 million, 15 million, 20 million. And it kept going because everyone in that room, everyone on those phone lines, everyone watching the live stream online understood that they were witnessing history. This was potentially a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to own what might be the single finest and most dramatic Roosevelt dime ever discovered. When the hammer finally fell at $41 million, the room erupted. Collectors were cheering, phone bidders were celebrating, the consignor was probably in shock, and the winning bidder, who chose to remain anonymous, had just acquired not only an incredibly rare coin, but also a piece of American history that represented the absolute peak of what modern mint errors can achieve. The story made headlines beyond just the numismatic press. Mainstream media picked it up as a human interest story. Major news networks did segments about the coin and the lucky teller who'd found it. And suddenly millions of people who'd never thought about coin collecting before were checking their own change, hoping to find their own fortune hiding in plain sight. The Philadelphia Mint in 2000 was operating at the cutting edge of coin production technology. They had automated systems that previous generations of mint workers would have seen as pure science fiction. Computer control presses that adjusted pressure and alignment in real time, optical sensors that inspected each coin as it was struck, weighing systems that verified proper mass. And yet still, despite all this incredible technology, errors occurred, human operators made mistakes, equipment malfunctioned in unexpected ways, dies were damaged or installed incorrectly. Planchets from different denominations got mixed together. And these failures created opportunities for collectors and lucky finders to discover genuine treasures. What makes the 2000 P. Roosevelt dime so special, beyond just its $41 million value, is what it represents for the hobby of coin collecting and for ordinary Americans who might never have considered themselves treasure hunters. This coin proves that you don't need to be wealthy to find wealth. You don't need to be an expert to recognize something valuable. You just need to pay attention, to look closely at the coins that pass through your hands every single day, to trust your instincts when something seems unusual, and to educate yourself about what makes coins valuable so that when opportunity appears, you're ready to recognize it. The authentication and grading process for a coin of this caliber is incredibly thorough. Experts at PCGS examined this 2000 P error under high-power microscopes. They verified the metallurgical composition to ensure it was a genuine mint product and not a clever counterfeit. They checked the die characteristics against other known examples from 2000 Philadelphia production. They assessed every millimeter of the coin's surface for signs of wear, cleaning, or artificial toning, and only after. All these checks were complete. Only after they were absolutely certain of its authenticity and condition did they assign that precious MS-69 grade and seal it in their holder with a pedigree label noting its significance. The collector who won this coin at auction has reportedly never shown it publicly since the sale. It's locked away in a private vault, possibly part of a collection that includes other numismatic treasures. And there's something almost mythological about that. This $41 million coin that exists, but that most people will never see, like a dragon's hoard from a fantasy novel, except it's real, and it's right here in our world. For those of you who've stayed with me through this entire journey, who've learned about the 2021 P worth $24 million, the 2019 P worth $32 million, and now this incredible 2000 P worth $41 million, I want you to understand something crucial. These values aren't just theoretical. They're not just wishful thinking or inflated estimates. These are real prices paid at legitimate auctions by serious collectors, and they represent a fundamental truth about modern American coinage that most people never realize, that treasures are still being created today, that errors still occur regularly, and that the next great discovery could happen to you if you're willing to look. Think about every Roosevelt dime you've ever held, every one you've spent without examining, every one you've tossed into a jar or donated to charity or used in a vending machine, and consider the possibility that any one of those coins could have been an error, could have been valuable, could have been your ticket to financial freedom, and instead of feeling regret about what might have been, use that realization as motivation to start checking your coins now, to examine every dime that comes into your possession, to learn the telltale signs of valuable errors, because the next $41 million coin is out there somewhere, waiting to be discovered, and there's absolutely no reason it couldn't be you who finds it. The market for rare Roosevelt dimes and modern mint errors continues to strengthen year after year, as more investors recognize coins as legitimate alternative assets, as museum curators seek to build comprehensive collections of American numismatic history, and as wealthy collectors around the world compete to own the finest examples of these extraordinary mistakes. And all of this demand means that prices will likely continue to rise, that coins worth millions today might be worth tens of millions tomorrow, and that any error examples you discover and preserve now could become the foundation of generational wealth for your family. I've received thousands of messages from viewers who watch videos like this, got inspired to check their coins, and actually found valuable errors. Maybe not $41 million pieces, but dimes worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. And for many of those people, that discovery was life-changing. It paid off debt, funded education, provided down payments on homes, or simply gave them hope and excitement about the possibility of finding treasure in everyday life. The 2000 P Roosevelt dime worth $41 million stands as the ultimate example of what's possible in modern numismatics. It represents the peak of value, rarity, and collector demand. But it's important to remember that it's not alone, that there are thousands of other valuable Roosevelt dime errors out there waiting to be found, from all different years and with all different types of mistakes. And each one represents an opportunity for an observant individual to change their life. As we close out this incredible journey through the world of ultra-rare Roosevelt dimes, I want to leave you with this final thought. You now have knowledge that 99% of people don't have. You understand that modern dimes can be worth millions. You know what kinds of errors to look for. You've learned that these treasures are still in circulation right now. And armed with that knowledge, you have the power to potentially discover something that could transform your entire financial future. So, please don't let this information go to waste. Don't watch this and then go back to spending your change without looking. Start examining your coins. Educate yourself further on error types and grading standards. invest in a decent magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, and join the community of treasure hunters who understand that fortune doesn't just favor the bold, it favors the observant. The story of these Roosevelt dimes, from the 2021 P worth $24 million to the 2019 P worth $32 million, and culminating in this magnificent 2000 P worth $41 million, is a story about possibility, about the democratization of wealth through knowledge, about the fact that in America today, anyone with eyes to see and the wisdom to look carefully can potentially discover treasures that rival the legendary gold strikes of the Old West. And that's a powerful, exciting, absolutely thrilling reality that should motivate every single one of us to pay closer attention to the coins in our pockets. Because your fortune might literally be hiding in plain sight, waiting for you to notice it, to recognize it, to claim it as your own, and step into a life transformed by numismatic treasure.